Hi all. We were going to cover some more health and sanitation, and we'll still do that at a later time. But your director had mentioned that some of you had questions about materials in the classroom. So we're going to actually talk about materials. And I think what I'm going to do, I think right now you can see the ECERS book on the screen. And I think I'm just going to kind of informally go through the ECERS book, and we'll talk about materials as we get to some of these places. So materials, for the most part, are you're going to find in the individual items, specifically down in the notes for clarification. So we'll kind of cover this. And like I said, this is going to be a little informal, so we're going to go through furniture. We've got furniture for routine care, play, and learning. Just making sure that there is enough furniture, sturdy and in good repair, child size. Most furniture should be child size. Convenient to use. And then they do like you to have either a woodworking bench, sand and water table, or an easel. One of those things need to be used. Okay, let's see. All right, so number 3 in your ECERS book, that's page 14. Furnishings for relaxation and comfort, and this is what's in your cozy area. And we are looking at, under number 3, it says some soft toys accessible for children, but then if you skip over to 7, it says many soft toys accessible to children. So, and there's an asterisk there, so you do want to go down into notes for clarification. It's 7.2, and what it says, many means enough so that children do not have to compete over them. So if you're 2s and 3s, you need at least 2 soft toys for each child. 4s and 5s, at least 10 toys. And if there's more than 20 children, then enough for half the group size allowed. So that's kind of where we get the numbers from. And I will be sending you material checklists along with this, so you can see them all in one place. But I wanted you to have an idea of where we got these checklists from, which is going to be mostly your notes for clarification. Arrangement, space for privacy. See, child-related display. There are some materials that have to be here that you're going to look, if you're looking around the room, what do you see that's around the room? You should be able to see that most of the display is work done by the children. So most of what you see, and then there's an asterisk here. I looked down notes for clarification, and they're looking at what's the overall impression. When you're looking at your classroom, when you're looking at the environment, what's the overall impression? Is most of what I see going to be work that's done by children? For ECERS, individualized children work should predominate, and that means work that they have chosen and they have done, not product work with an expectation of a finished product. And then you can score even higher if you have some kind of 3-dimensional work display. So Play-Doh, sculptures, clay, that kind of thing. I'm going to keep moving here. Gross motor equipment, and this is mostly what's outside. There should be enough so that children have access without a long wait. And the equipment that they have should stimulate a variety of skills. So you think about those verbs outside, you know, does the equipment promote those skills? Balancing, climbing, jumping, crawling, throwing, catching, kicking, those kinds of things. And when it says a variety of skills, again, there's an asterisk here, so I'm going to go down in notes for clarification. That's 5.2. A variety of skills means 7 to 9 different skills. So, and it's equipment related. So they have to have equipment out there that's going to promote those 7 skills. So think about a tricycle. The skills that are promoted with a tricycle: steering and pedaling. If there's a tunnel they can crawl through, there's crawling. Balls, kicking, jumping, kicking, catching, throwing, bouncing, those kinds of things. So do they have those enough to meet 7 to 9 skills? And is there enough so that children don't have to wait their turn always to play with? Okay, I think that's all for this. Let's see. Bear with me while I keep looking for these things. Mostly it's going to be in your learning areas where you're going to find materials. Okay, so books and pictures. What do they have to have for books and pictures? They need a wide selection of books, okay, and some additional language materials. Okay, so a wide selection of books. Again, there's an asterisk. Look down, 5.1. A wide selection of book means a variety of topics: fantasy, factual information, stories about people, animals, nature and science, books that reflect different cultures and abilities. So that wide selection of books has to meet those categories. Additional language materials, 5.2, posters and pictures, flannel board stories, picture card games, recorded stories and songs. Those kinds of things are what they should have. So the number of books you should have, it says some books accessible, and I'm going to go down here to see what they mean by some. At least 1 book for half of the children that are attending at any time. So if you've got a group of 20, half of that group would be 10, so you have to have at least 10 books. Okay? All right. Communication, language. Fine motor. This is your manipulative materials. They should have many developmentally appropriate materials of each type accessible. So each type, 5.1, many, requires at least 3 examples of each type. And what are the types? They're going to be over here. There are several different types. Small building toys, and that's your interlocking blocks, Legos, Lincoln Logs, those kinds of things. Art materials that they have to hold with their hands, crayons, scissors, things that they manipulate. Manipulatives such as beads, pegs, pegboards, sewing cards, puzzles, and then many, again, at least 3 examples of each of these types. Okay, so that's your fine motor materials. Your art materials, it says many and varied art materials. And then if you go down, notes for clarification again, many and varied means 3 to 5 different art materials accessible from at least 4 of the categories. So the categories are going to be up here. Categories are your drawing materials, paper, crayons, pens, pencils, paints, three-dimensional materials, Play-Doh, clay, collage materials, and tools. All right, so 3 to 5 different materials accessible from at least 4 of these categories. So there's 5 categories, at least 4 of them have to be represented with 3 to 5 different art materials. Okay, that's your art. Music and movement. Forgive me for not looking straight at you, but I'm using a second screen, and that's where the ECERS book is pulled up. So music and movement, it says many music materials accessible. And then they give examples, your instruments, tape player, dance props. And many, if I go to notes for clarification, many means, let's see. Where is that? Oh, sorry, it's over here. Many. There must be enough for at least half of the children to use at once, plus music to listen to. So tape player, record player, MP3 player, whatever you're using for music, they should have that. So many, at least half for the children, and then it has to be accessible. Then it says various types of music are used with the children, and they give examples: classical music, popular music, different cultures, different languages, could be country music or Latin music, Indian flute music, any of those kinds of things to use with children. So those are the kinds of things that you have to have in your music center. And the one thing to remember here is for older children, let me see if I can find it here. I know it says it somewhere that older children have to be able to, here it is, to access the music on their own. So for a tape player to be considered accessible, if the majority of your children are ages 4 and older, then the children should be able to use the tapes independently. Okay, so they should be able to access it on their own. You can, of course, guide them and show them how to use it. But if the majority of your kids are 4 and older, they have to have access on their own. Your block center. Now, blocks are considered anything that is non-interlocking. So your Legos, your Duplos, your waffle blocks, anything like that is not going to be considered for your block area. They have to be your unit blocks, your typical wooden unit blocks. You can use large hollow blocks, homemade blocks you can make, anything like that. But anything that's interlocking is going to be considered a manipulative no matter the size. There has to be enough space, blocks, and accessories accessible for 3 or more children to build at the same time. So you think about the ages of your children and what they can do in the block center. Can 3 or more build substantial buildings? And I think there has been an updated change for blocks. You're not going to see it on the screen, but I am going to read it to you. What it's saying now in the updated notes for clarification is at least 80 blocks for one structure. So if you need enough for 3 children to build substantial structures at the same time, that means you have to do 80 times 3. So you have to make sure that there's that many blocks in your block area. And if you have sets of blocks that are larger than the unit blocks, like the big hollow wooden blocks and things like that, then there needs to be at least 40 of them are required. Okay. And then they also need accessories. So accessories would be considered, let's see, somewhere it should tell us where accessories are, what they are. Okay, accessories. And then examples: toy, people, animals, vehicles, and road signs. So if you've got toy people, animals, cars, and trucks to use in the block centers, those are considered accessibles. And there has to be enough, this, again, for the children to be able to use substantially. The one thing to be aware of in the block center is to not put your manipulative blocks like we talked about. You don't want to have your Duplos, your Legos, your Lincoln Logs, things like that do not belong in the block center. Those are considered manipulatives. And one of the reasons they don't like to see them in the block center is because if children are spending their time playing with those items, it's taking away from them playing with the actual blocks themselves. Okay, so those are blocks. I think I covered that. Sand and water play. Now how often you do this is going to dictate what your score is. So if you're going to do it, if you only want to score 3, then you're doing it, it says sand or water play, accessible either outdoors or indoors. If you want to score 5, it's sand and water play, either indoors or outdoors. And if you want to score 7, it's sand and water play, both indoors and outdoors. Okay, so that's going to determine what you want your score to be. And then along with the sand and water, a variety of sand and water toys to play with. So your scoops, your spoons, funnels, pouring things. And this has to be at least 1 hour daily. So this does not fall under the substantial portion of the day that we talked about earlier. It's 1 hour a day that it has to be. Oh, and by the way, that also stands for the music as well. Music does not have to be open all day long. Now you can open it all day long, but that does not fall under the substantial portion of the day. The minimal requirement is 1 hour a day for music, and the same for sand and water. And sand, you can replace sand with other materials as long as it's pourable material. So it should be pourable and measurable. So it could be macaroni, or it could be rice or something like that. They do make allowances for that. All right, so that, I think that's your sand and water materials. Dramatic play materials. It says many dramatic play materials, including dress-up clothes. So many, if I go to notes for clarification, many means that 3 or more children can use the materials at one time without competing with each other, okay? And there's plentiful enough to encourage more complex play. So some of the ideas that they're talking about would be housekeeping themes, your dolls, your child-sized furniture, dress up, kitchen materials. A work theme is good. So clothing or materials that encourage office, construction, farm, store, firefighting, transportation, any of those things. Fantasy play, and your leisure, your sports themes. So you do have to have at least 2 different themes accessible for dramatic play. And then your many, again, 3 or more, enough for 3 or more children. Okay. All righty. Nature and science. Again, many developmentally appropriate games, materials, and activities from 3 categories accessible. Okay, so your categories are collections of natural objects. So rocks, seashells, insects, things like that. Living things to care for, plants, goldfish, a hamster. Those all could be considered living things. Nature and science books, games, or toys. And then nature and science activities. So that's things that they could do to experiment with, your magnifying glass, your magnets, things like that. So, and then many means 3 to 5 examples of the 3 categories. So 3 to 5 examples of each of these categories, your collections, your living things, your nature science books and games, and your nature and science activities. Okay, I think that's it for science. There we go. So we're looking at materials, math and number. The thing to remember about math and number, that can be anywhere in the room. You're not limited to a math and number learning center. It could be throughout the room. So it says many developmentally appropriate materials of various types accessible. And the types are going to be considered counting, measuring, learning shape, and size. Let me see if it says anything else here. Yes, counting, measuring, comparing quantities, shapes, and then written numbers. So your calendar, your clock in the room, those things count. If you have a cash register in dramatic play, if you have calculators in your writing center or your dramatic play center. Many, again, means 3 to 5 of each type. 3 to 5 of each of these. Okay? All right. And that's another thing, falls under substantial portion of the day. All right. Use of TV, video, and or computers. This could be, if you don't use the TV, if you don't have video or computers, then this would be considered an NA. So NA is actually considered in scoring this. If you don't have it, if you don't use it, you don't have to have it. If you do have it, then it has to be nonviolent, culturally sensitive. There has to be alternative activities accessible, and their time is limited. So it's limited to 1 hour daily of screen time and limited to 20 minutes daily. Or the computer turns are limited to 20 minutes daily if you have a computer. The materials have to be considered good for children. And there has to be alternative free choice activities available. So they shouldn't have to use it. And the other thing is that staff should be actively involved. Okay? So again, that's not something you have to do. NA is actually, could be considered. Having diversity through the room, promoting acceptance of diversity. You do want many books, pictures, and materials accessible, showing people of different races, culture, ages, abilities, and gender. When they're talking about gender, they're talking about non-stereotypical roles. So think like female firefighter, a male dancer, a male cook, a female soldier, a female construction worker, things like that. So make sure that you have books, pictures, materials that depict that. And then some props representing various cultures included in dramatic play. So that could be different dolls from different races or different skin tones. It could be your cooking and eating utensils. Your play food could represent different cultures, or you could have laminated menus from different kinds of restaurants. Just being sure that you're including diversity throughout the classroom. And I think that's pretty much it for your materials. I will be adding, I will be sending material checklists along with the link to this video. So you'll be able, now you'll know where those checklists come from, because we literally do take them right from the environment rating scales and mainly down from the notes to clarification. Okay.